Okay, it looks like we are live. Hello, everyone. My name is Stanley Stewart. I'm a junior here at Brown University, and I'd like to thank all our viewers who are joining us today for participating in the very first Brown University Google Hangout on Air for first-generation college students. So this event is made possible by Dean Yolanda Rome, who will introduce herself later on in the talk, in the Office of the Dean of the College. And the purpose of this event is to provide first-generation students and their families an opportunity to learn more about Brown University, student life, the transition to college, and also to help answer any questions students and their families may have. So I'd like to start off by introducing our wonderful selection of panelists who have decided to join us today. I'm going to start with Dean Yolanda Rome. So, oh, sorry, just one second. So Dean Yolanda Rome is joining us. So she serves as Assistant Dean of the College for first year and sophomore studies at Brown University in the Office of the Dean of the College. Dean Rome was the first person in her family to go to college and went from a blue-collar town in eastern Connecticut to Yale University. Due to her very committed belief in education as a venue for upward mobility, Dean Rome then went on to Harvard University Graduate School of Education. Dean Rome has taught high school science in Dorchester, Massachusetts, and led a college access program. Dean Rome has been with Brown University since 2008, helping assist students in their transition to and navigation through their time here at Brown and beyond. I'd like to welcome Dean Rome. How are you?
Good. Thanks for having me, Stanley. Really appreciate you putting this all together.
Thank you. It really wouldn't be possible without the help and support of your office. So our next panelist is Destin Sizemore. Destin is a senior from Chattanooga, Tennessee, concentrating in American Studies. Destin is co-president of Pride in Business. He's an undergraduate representative on President Paxson's Diversity Advisory Board, a Sidney Frank Scholar, and a member of the Brown Advertising Club. Destin is also a former Minority Peer Counselor friend with the Third World Center and Outreach Chair for the Queer Alliance. Thank you so much for joining us, Destin.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Stanley.
Fantastic. Next, we have Floripa Olguin. So Floripa Olguin is a junior from Isleta, New Mexico, concentrating in public policy. Floripa is extremely active with the Third World Center on campus, including receiving the Rising Star Award in 2013, previously serving as a minority peer counselor, and now serving as a coordinator for that program. Floripa is also active in Native Americans at Brown and Ivy Native Council. Thank you for joining us, Floripa.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And last but certainly not least is Jessica Brown. So Jessica is a junior from Canton, Ohio, concentrating in business, entrepreneurship, and organizations. Jessica serves as the co-chair for Brown's Relay for Life team, is a member of the Divine Rhythm Step team, and is also one of the co-founders of IVG, the Inter-Ivy First Generation College Student Network. This past year, Jessica was named a Social Innovation Fellow with the Swearer Center for Public Service, and is also active in a spoken word poetry collective and the Third World Center community on campus. There we go. Welcome, Jessica.
Thanks, Stanley.
Fantastic. So once again, I'd really like to welcome any first-generation college students, incoming first-generation college students at Brown who are watching this, and any families who may also be viewing. So the way that the time for this call is going to be broken down is this hangout is going to last for 1 hour in length. The first part of which is going to be question, answer, myself serving as a moderator, and our panelists helping to answer those questions. And then during the last part, due to the wonders of Google Hangout, we have a really cool feature where we're going to be able to actually answer some questions live from some of the audience members. So audience members should be able to click on a Q&A button that's going to allow them to submit questions during the course of our talk. So for viewers, if during any point during the duration of this conversation you have any questions that you think about or that come to mind or that your parents may have, feel free to submit them, and we should be able to help answer them live during the last segment of this talk. So first, we're going to jump a bit into academics at Brown, and I'm going to ask Dean Rome to sort of maybe be our first sort of panelist to help answer this question. So on a sort of basic level, what are some of the degree requirements for Brown University students, and what is Brown University really, what sort of values does Brown hope to impart on students?
So students have 8 semesters to finish their degree, and they need 30 credits. So that means a full-time load here is 4 courses. A lot of times students come in and think that 7 courses is what you took in high school, 7, 8, and all these extracurriculars, so really want to do 5. And we all in the Dean of the College office recommend all students to just stick with the 4 that first term, and if you need to go down to 3, that's a good time to do that, because you do have 2 opportunities in your time at Brown to go down to 3 courses without it affecting your standing. We really hope that students explore the curriculum. And what does that mean? That means that we want you to take 1 or 2 courses that you know that you're going to need for the direction that you're going in. So if you're going into science, you'll probably need a math, you'll probably need a science. You might want to take an English course to kind of really get that foundational college level writing in that first semester, and then something else. So something that totally doesn't seem like anything you've ever thought you wanted to study, but really you do have that opportunity, and we really encourage you to explore that first semester, especially really all the way through.
Fantastic, thanks. Do any of our panelists want to speak a bit about their experiences at Brown, navigating, picking classes and choosing your courses? All right, I'm going to ask Destin, since he's our senior, a bit of time.
But who speaks one? Yeah, so I think speaking about taking that one class that you never thought you would take. I took a class my freshman year called Asian American Theater and Performance, and I sort of took it because the professor wowed me, and he just seemed brilliant, and he was using like really big words, and I always thought that I'd been interested in studying performance. I didn't know anything about Asia largely, and there's a lot to know obviously. So I thought I would just take that, and it turned out to be a wonderful class where it was really small, and I met tons of other freshmen that I just really connected with because it was a first year seminar. And so yeah, it just turned out to be a great experience. I'm glad I did it.
That's awesome. So Floripa, could you speak a little bit about how students go about picking classes here at Brown? What sort of that process look like for a student who might be coming in?
Okay. So I think for the first 2 weeks, it's important to talk about shopping period. I think that's one of my favorite parts of when we get on campus. So shopping period is essentially this 2-week period in which students are kind of allowed to preview their classes. You have students who will probably shop around, I would say, 6 to 8 classes, and usually you have an idea of what direction you want. Sometimes if there's a class that you're not really sure about, but you want to see, also have a chance to get the curriculum or meet the professor. So there's this point in time when you can preview these classes and really see if it's a course that you want to take. In my experience, shopping period in my first year was really fun, and it continues to be fun because I can have an idea of what I want to take, not be entirely sure, but still have the ability to kind of preview these various classes, meet the professor, and see if it's something that I really want to do, which really helps in terms of really focusing in on what I want to study during my time at Brown.
Great, thanks so much, Flo. So Jessica, could you speak a little bit about, I guess to hit off Floripa's earlier point, about relationships with professors. So can you talk a little bit about what that looks like for students in their academic life here at Brown, and class sizes and professors, and how students sort of navigate that?
Absolutely. So in some of your bigger introductory classes, especially if you're in science or math fields, you're going to have a professor. You'll also have some teaching assistants. Your professor will always be teaching your class, but TAs are a really good entry point to be able to talk to someone who's also a graduate student, someone who feels a little bit more on the same level. And they've are all very helpful and have office hours. Now there's also very small classes, like Dustin mentioned earlier. There's some seminars and just generally smaller classes. And there you can really be able to have a relationship with professors, and even with big classes you can. You really have to look into office hours. If they said something during class that you want clarification on, just feel free to go up and talk to professors. I know a lot of office hours are really underutilized, and professors really, really want to see student faces in there. We don't have a lot of students here, so they really do take a lot of interest and really invest in the undergraduate students. So take advantage of that.
Very, very nice. Awesome. So I'm going to defer back to you, Destin. So what is, since you're a senior at Brown, so you're going on your 4th year, congratulations. So what has been navigating, what have been some of the benefits and challenges, frustration, any advice on navigating academics at Brown for, in terms of advice for incoming students as a first-generation college student? A couple of things that you wish you had done or any tips you might have.
Yeah, so I think to speak to Jessica's point actually about office hours, professors really do want to see you in their office hours, and I know, so freshman year I took a course called The History of American Advertising, which like has pretty much been my favorite course at Brown, but it's really big. It was like 200 people, and I loved the professor and I really wanted to get to know her, and she expressed multiple times in class that, you know, she wanted us to come to office hours, but I just don't think I was like necessarily comfortable doing that because you know, I was like, wow, like this is a professor at an Ivy League institution, blah 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 blah. Like 200 people class, like I didn't feel super like connected to her like in class. But then I was taking so the Asian American theater class that I took was like 8 people, and we sat around the table every day in a really small classroom inside of a library. We sat around with the professor, and you know there was much more of an opportunity to speak to him. So going to his office hours was really easy. Especially comparatively, even though he's really brilliant as well. Yeah, so I just think I learned from taking a small class how to go to office hours, but I really wish that freshman year I had gone to more office hours and I had taken more time to sort of get to know professors, because by the time you start to choose your own advisors from like sophomore year and junior year, it's helpful to know like there are tons of professors at Brown with tons of like very, very different interests, so it's great to explore what professors' interests are and like the ways in which they might be helpful for guiding you in your studies at Brown. So I would have taken greater advantage of that during freshman year, but it's also okay if you don't.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Justin. So Dean Rome, actually on that note, I think, can you maybe give viewers an idea of how, especially for a lot of the freshmen who are going to be coming in, how college might be different from their high school experience and sort of things that they might want to take note of or think about?
Sure. I think one of the things that's the biggest transition for everyone, not just students who are first generation, is that the workload gets so large so fast. For every hour that you are in class, you should expect to spend 3 to 5 hours of studying, and studying could be in study groups, it could be making flashcards, it could be reading your textbook, please read your textbooks, and really just getting pre-prepared for class versus waiting. I think in high school you usually go to class, then do the homework that emphasizes what was produced in the class or what was presented in the class. But in college you really need to be familiar with the material before you get to class, so then it's not a different language when you go to class. And another big challenge is your parents aren't there to say, go to bed, get up, brush your teeth, do your studying. Some people really have parents like that, some people don't, and they're used to it, but it's even more so that you have to schedule almost all your time, including time to hang out with your friends and time to eat and sleep.
That's fantastic. Floripa, I see you laughing. Do you have any experiences that you can share about what your first year was like, your transition to college, and dealing with some of those things that maybe Yoli mentioned?
Okay. Yeah, I definitely think that the amount of freedom is kind of very, very vast at the beginning of college. I would emphasize that if you do not have a calendar or an agenda, that you start using one. For me, I started using a Google Calendar, which is really useful for me because I could kind of see where my time was going and how to kind of keep track of my schedule. And I think the reason why I was laughing is because in terms of really making, like, you wouldn't think that something as basic as like eating or sleeping is that like you would lose time on it, but there have been times where I've just lost track of time, either studying or hanging out with friends, and you realize like, oh no, like I've gone all day and I haven't really like eaten, or I need to sleep. So just like making sure that you really do take account and take care of yourself, because usually when it's on your schedule, you really have to know and be responsible for yourself.
Yes, emphasizing the self-care. Yeah, from my own personal experience, I can relate to that notion. Learning to deal with a lot of the independence that comes with being a college student and sort of learning how to schedule your time. Google Calendar personally has saved my life. It's so that I get anything done. So I guess I'm going to defer back to Dean Rome and then ask a couple of you guys as well in terms of, so what sort of resources or support can students seek out, or that does the university offer for students in terms of navigating their academics? I know maybe Dean Rome, you can speak a little bit about advising. That might be a good starting point.
Sure. So the first thing is everyone as an incoming first year is assigned to an advisor, either through, you might have picked a course that you are getting an advisor through the course, or tied to the concentration that you indicated when you either applied or if you filled out the form kind of in June of your academic preferences. So I actually am in charge of that process. I'm very careful with making sure that I can get as close to people's interests as possible. And that first person, even if they're not in the concentration that you choose in the future, or that for whatever reason we didn't have enough advisors in the concentration that you think, really you think of that advisor as your first point of support, in the sense of, I don't know how to do X, or I don't know where to go to do Y. I don't know how to get my bare bucks money on my card so that I can do my laundry. Not every advisor would know that, including myself. However, I can point to my Mickle John, who's a student peer advisor, who can say, oh yeah, that's easy enough. Well, I'm not going to say it because I don't know how. But the important thing to remember is that your peer advisor, so they're Mickle John, they're a student who has been assigned and is trained to help students navigate through especially those first few days. You have residential peer leaders. Dustin was mentioned that you were an MPC friend, and I know Stanley's been an MPC. That stands for Minority Peer Counselors, and Floripa's been an MPC. So there are all these different resources, and by resources I mean people, who are all here to help students get off on the right foot. And it's always easier to not ask, but then that always leads to more problems later, like a pile of laundry. That's I didn't do. So we have that advising resources. We have tutoring for most introductory and intermediate math, science, econ, languages. We have academic coaches who can help you with that schedule that we were talking about before. I run a bunch of workshops with peer coaches, and also myself. I do how to talk to professors. I run the time management workshops. We have some on reducing stress. There's all different ways that we know it takes for students to learn how to be college students. And we'll say sometimes it takes 4 years. The faster you can learn how to do that, the better off you'll be. So make sure you use all the people that you see here and that you'll meet when you come in, gosh, just a couple weeks.
Ah, yeah.
And also, so Stanley, Floripa, and Jessica have all actually lived in like freshman dorms as like the go-to people, as the go-to counselors for students. I personally haven't. I was like an assistant to that program, but yeah, I mean, when you're a freshman, there are literally 3 people assigned to you to be like your residential counselors in different roles. There's one that serves generally as a residential peer counselor. There's one that serves as minority peer counselor, and then there's a women's peer counselor. So they're all like, and they can speak more to that. The people who have been in BC can speak more to that role. But in general, like depending on what issue you're having, like, there's an assigned person there to is trained to be very open to speaking about issues. And, just really like their primary job, and they get paid to do it. Their primary job is just to be there for you and need to and I thought that was a good thing to have. I actually lived next to my freshman. It was wonderful. But yeah, I always thought that it was like a great program to have as a freshman.
Awesome. Thanks, Destin. Jessica, do you want to speak at all or a little bit about what it's like as a student, thinking back to your freshman year, even this past year as a sophomore, accessing some of those resources on campus, or any suggestions you might have for incoming students?
Yes. So I really want to echo Dean Rome's point just about the vast majority of things that offered through advising. A little note about tutoring. I came in freshman year, decided to start a whole new language, Chinese, and I was having such a tough time like getting it down. And I heard about tutoring. My professor suggested tutoring, and it was kind of a shock, to be quite honest. It was like, wait, I was the girl in high school helping everybody else out. How is this now my situation? And I think that's a really big mental thing that I had to get over. I had to realize that like this was a new level, and these were harder things that I had on my plate, and it was completely okay. And actually, it was my duty to go and get tutoring, to go and get that support that I needed. So, in actually reaching out, there again are just so many people, whether it is that professor, whether it is that person tutoring you, who really want to help you succeed. And I had to come to the realization that it was silly of me not to want that for myself and not to reach out and gain those bits of help.
Awesome. Thanks, Jess.
Can I share a story that happened? So it was one of my first or second years here, and a professor was so upset because these 3 students never picked up their midterms or finals, I think. And it was kind of beyond the point, it must have been finals, because it was beyond the point where they kind of needed to get them to maybe look at them. And she wrote to these students and CC'd me and a few other people in the dean of the college office saying, this is your right to look at the papers that you turned in, to get feedback from the professor so that you can improve. We don't expect you to have perfect writing as a first year. We don't expect it as a sophomore or junior. It's always a continual improvement line. And I think it's just very hard coming from being the top of your class, getting the best scores, everybody looking up to you for the answers, as Jessica said, and knowing that everything here is a kind of a reiterative process that you always want to keep improving. So it's hard to just say, well, I'm going for the A. That's not really what it's about anymore, which is also a really big mental barrier to get over. It's more about being here to learn.
Very, very sound advice. Thank you, Dean Rome. Actually, I think that's a really one sort of like last sort of question. Floripa, I wonder if you can talk a little bit about, I don't think we mentioned this earlier, but the option to take classes SNC and sort of how that, explaining a little bit about what that is for students, and then how that maybe has affected your experience, your academic experience here at Brown.
So SNC is basically, I believe it's satisfactory credit, which means that if you fulfill the credit, then you pass the class, but it's not grade-based, so you don't receive an A, B, or C. It's basically a pass-fail class, and so the way I've used it at Brown, it's been very helpful to me because I'll have 4 classes throughout my years, but one thing that I've been wanting to learn while at Brown has been Spanish. So for me, the language is very difficult to learn. And so what I would do is to kind of take off a little bit of the pressure is to take it SNC. And so throughout the semester, I would be able to explore the language, really have no fear with what I was writing or what I was learning about, to really push myself to learn the language in the way that I felt comfortable with. And that really helped throughout my time at Brown, to where I can have these other classes where they are grades-based, which has sometimes this other pressure in terms of how I'm going to manage those classes. But then I also have S&C, which to me helps in terms of really being here at Brown for learning. And I think that it's been a challenge in terms of really taking classes for the love of learning, but when I took S&C with my Spanish class, I noticed like a huge improvement in terms of how I learned the language, mostly because there wasn't this pressure to know the perfect grammar. It was more to explore the language so that I could actually learn it and be more fluent, which is something that I found really beneficial.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Flo. So going to shift the dialogue a little bit away from academics to talk a little bit more about student life. So I think a sort of good first question is, so students are going to be getting here, some of them really soon for pre-orientation programs, most students in just a couple weeks. So I think let's start with maybe Jessica on this question. What can students expect in terms of dorm life and housing? I know this might be the first time that a lot of folks are going to be living with roommates. So can you talk a little bit about what that experience is like for a first-year student?
Sure. So most of you should already have your housing assignments, know who you're living with, hopefully. But you kind of come into these communities, and they've really stressed in the past couple of years trying to make the freshman dorms communities. And you'll have a unit where, as Dustin mentioned earlier, you have these 3 pillars of support for you. You'll have your minority peer counselor, you'll have your women's peer counselor, and you'll have your residential peer counselor. And you'll have your roommate and everybody else who's in your unit, which is basically just a freshman cohort, people where you guys will have events together or compete in a big competition your freshman and then again your senior year. So dorm life, I mean, you have your room. A lot of the dorms have kitchens in them, which I know is a new thing, so you can cook with your friends. They also have lounges which can serve as extra study spaces if you don't want to go to the library or just want a cooler place to study or hang out. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Very cool. So I'm going to defer back to Destin on this one for the next question. Can you talk a little bit about the roommate experience and what having a roommate is like and sort of how that process works and how that affects sort of your living situation? And you can also, if you want, touch on, I guess, dining, because we haven't touched on that because we do have a lot of dining options that are also going to be very different for a lot of students who are coming in for the first time.
Yeah, so as Jessica said, like hopefully everyone who's participating already has their roommate assignment. I know me and my roommate connected over Facebook pretty early on in the summer, and it was clear that like we were going to get along. We could just be a really nice, chill guy, like international student, which I also thought would be like a great, like very interesting for me. Being first gen from like, I'm technically from like the Georgia-Tennessee border. But like I'm from there, and there's never been like an opportunity for me to go outside of the country. So it was awesome, like living with someone who's from South Korea, and he lived like in a lot of different countries that I would love to visit. And there was so much to talk about in terms of like what was your experience living in Portugal for 3 years when you were in high school? What was that like? And like what was the food like, and how was it compared to Brown? And you can do that with anyone, like even someone from like Los Angeles. It's like we still have a lot to connect about, We both come from like really interesting cities, most likely, or like we're coming from different places. So yeah, there's a lot of room to connect, and I really enjoyed that. And you know, you're supposed to follow these like roommate agreements. So there's like discussions and boundaries that Brown tries to like make you have. You like really have those. But I mean, it ended up being a lot easier than I thought it was going to be. And then sophomore year, I lived with a roommate again, but it was one of my best friends. You kind of get to choose who you live with sophomore year, which is always great. Um, and it turned out to be a lot of fun having a roommate. Actually, like, sometimes I miss it. Yeah. Oh, and dining. So dining's really awesome. I'm just now going off meal plan because I'm living off campus, and so it's like a lot less convenient to be on meal plan. I've always thought meal plan was like a super convenient thing, and you know, if you're on like a financial aid, then then the university like covers it for you, which is great. But just being able to like drop into, you know, the ratty and see, especially freshmen and sophomore year, you get to see everyone you know is there, and you can always just like sort of walk in and find a table with one of your friends and just sit down, and you know, even you're like leaving class, you're all stressed out, and then go to the ratty and there your friends are, and they have waffle fries. And all the best. So yeah, I don't know. I'm gonna miss Milk Bunny, I think.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Declan. Oh yeah, go for it.
I just wanted to add one more thing about the roommate. I think for me, I live really closely with my sisters, and so well, like for the majority of my life, I shared a room with one of my sisters. So I had this idea of how I was going to be as a roommate. But I think it's important to kind of acknowledge that your roommate may or may not have that same experience. So just like communicating with them about what kind of expectations you have. For me, like my sister would always like let me leave my laundry out, but my roommate, my first year, like we like to keep things more tidy. So it's just those kind of like differences to like acknowledge or pay attention to, and also that sometimes like you and your roommate won't be friends. In my first year, I was very lucky because my roommate was like me and her became very close. But sometimes it doesn't happen, and that's okay. You're still within the Brown community, and you'll still be able to have a different array of friends, whether it's in your unit or elsewhere on campus. But
Awesome, and that is a fantastic transition into my next question, which is about sort of the Brown student body and like campus culture. Jess, do you want to talk a little bit about sort of, I guess, what's the Brown student body like? What's campus culture like for students?
Yeah, so I think something really interesting about Brown is that everybody is into a completely different thing than you probably are, but you're going to find folks who are into those same things. So we have like 400 student groups on campus, and it's like, why would you ever need that many student groups? Because folks are super passionate about what they're into and want to find other people who have that same passion. So whether it's about identity or my group Relay for Life or religious identity or gosh, sports clubs and dance groups. There's so many different things to be a part of. But overall, campus culture is pretty fun. I mean, we definitely like to have fun here at Brown. Very kind of like light, and one thing that I've really appreciated, just in my experience from the classes that I've had, there hasn't been a really strong sense of competition, and folks really want to help you out, and that's something that I think is super unique about Brown. It's just kind of that, like, everybody's willing to help folks out, whether it's by going to a dance performance or assisting you with some homework. So
Awesome. Dean Rome, can you speak a little bit about, I guess, tips or suggestions for students on balancing the social aspect of their lives and the academic aspect of their lives in college? Because speaking from my own personal experience, at least for me when I was a high school student, they were both pretty separate worlds. Like, I was a student when I was in school, and then I had my after-school clubs, and then I had my social life. But for I think a lot of college students, they're all sort of in this real weird mesh together. So any tips or advice for students?
Well, I guess I'd go back to when I was saying you really have to manage all your time, and how Floripa was saying that you might be at the dining hall and all of a sudden 3 hours have gone by. It's not as if we don't expect that to happen. It's not as if it won't happen. It definitely will. And what's important to know is in your schedule, like, all right, so I lost those 3 hours, fine. And not to beat yourself up about it, but really, so then where do I make those 3 hours up, or what do I give up? So maybe I give up the fact that I was planning to go out with a different group of friends Friday night, and maybe I'll have to stay in and do some work on Relay for Life. I'm on that committee, and I never got it done. So, you know, that's the world is moving towards a whole intermesh of work. For you guys, work is school, personal. The work-life balance is it's something that it exists for everyone. And as you get further on in your life, you know, you really have to understand that this is never easy. So really just understanding that you don't beat yourself up when you have difficulties with it. It's just like learning where you can improve it, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So there's no answer. There's no easy answer to say, you know, yes, you do your work from 9 to 5, and then you go home and you eat from 5 to 7, and then sleep, whatever. It doesn't work that way anymore. And I don't know that it ever has, but there's always this perception that there used to be the golden age of when there was some balance. So it's really just continually working on it, and I think that a lot of times when students get really stressed is like feeling like all these things are happening at once. So say it's midterms. It's midterms, you have a performance if you're in a dance group. The weather starts turning really poor, and now everybody's kind of hunkered down in their winter coats. So it feels like everything's coming together. And just to realize that, one, if you manage your time, it's all going to work out. It's hard. It's hard as a student and as a person to really remember that, but it does. Right, guys?
Yeah. I think one thing is that the lines will often blur. So you're taking a class with a friend, and you're studying, and you're trying to study, but it's still very social. And so sometimes it's hard to distinguish when it's work and when it's social. I think that part of that is, like, that's okay. And like Dean Rome said, it's just, like, don't be hard on yourself. It's all, like, a learning process. And definitely, like, use the academic coaches that are around. I've had to sit down with them a couple of times and kind of just, they'll sit down and, like, map out your weekend, what you need help with in terms of just keeping track of managing all of that goes into being at ground.
Yeah, absolutely. And Dean Rome, you mentioned this, and it's the golden question, because I know a lot of folks are going to be traveling from out of state or won't be from the area. New England is going to be a completely different experience. It's the weather. So I guess, Destin, you're also from the South. What was adjusting to the weather like in Providence? Is there anything you wish you had, like, brought in with you that maybe you forgot? Or I guess you can also speak a little bit more generally about, I guess, living in the city of Providence and sort of what that experience has been like as well, because you haven't really touched on that yet.
Yeah, I mean, speak to the, like, more practical elements of handling Providence winter. I'll say if you can afford to buy, like, a winter coat, buy one that's really versatile and one that fits well, and maybe will continue to fit well if that's possible. Because I know that's something we bought one, but it, like, wasn't as good as it should have been, and, like, it didn't really fit me that well. So, like, I ended up not really using it. There are also resources at Brown. So if you, like, need a winter coat or you need something, your family can't afford it, there are resources at Brown to help you make sure that you do have what you need to have for the winter, and I'd be happy to answer your questions about those resources, either, like, here in the QA or via email. But yeah, I mean, as long as you're prepared, though, like, in general, like, some days are, like, harder because it gets dark outside, and, like, maybe there'll be snow on the ground for, like, very longer than you think about if there being snow on the ground, like, maybe. But all in all, like, you're going to be spending a lot of time, like, indoors anyway. and you're going to be with your friends, and you can sort of commiserate over the weather, but then you can like cuddle up with a cup of cocoa and watch Netflix for like 6 hours or. So honestly, it's just a matter of like be with your friends during the winter, like get your work done at the Rock, and then if you don't want to go to bed, then like just like go like watch Netflix and stuff. And then when it becomes spring, then you can go hang out on the main green, and it'll be beautiful. Like when Providence weather is beautiful, it really is, and the trees are really nice, and the wind blows, and everyone's out on the main green playing frisbee or just like laying and like listening to Beyonce because that's what we do. Yeah, so in general, like you'll have different days, but it's a lot of fun. And Providence is a great city to explore too.
Awesome. Jessica, do you want to speak about that? Because you, correct me if I'm wrong, are actually in Providence and have spent the summer in Providence. So can you talk a little bit about what it's like to be in the city, and I guess talk a little bit about I guess like campus safety, what safety's like, and like health and wellness resources. I know a lot of, or at least my mom tells me, like the biggest fear that she had was freshman year. I was like, called her on the phone and she's like, oh, I think I'm coming down with a cold, and she's like, oh my God, my baby is dying. Like, what do you do? Like, where's the nearest hospital? Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of Providence, Providence is just a really cool city in general. They do a lot of artsy things, so whether that's water fire, which happens on Fridays or Saturdays, and it's just these huge cauldrons like lit on the river, and performances, and it's all very exciting, and there's things like going to the mall, or there's like a lot of different festive things happening around, and it's really awesome as Brown students that we get bus swipes with our ID card, so riding the bus is free, and it's a really great resource that I know me and my roommate used a lot this year to do things like grocery shopping and kind of exploring new things around Providence. So in terms of health and wellness, we have Brown Pharmacy, which I didn't know existed my freshman year. So I had a prescription, and I was like walking down the hill and like across town to a CVS, and like didn't realize that we had a pharmacy right on campus. So we have health services, so there's doctors there that will see you if you're sick, and there's that pharmacy, which the prices there are also a lot lower than CVS prices, just a heads up. And you'll have a certain amount of visits per semester, but I think it's something like 8, so nobody really goes over that. And you can just get better, and that's definitely where I know folks earlier talked about self-care, but when you're sick, you definitely need to know your limits and really communicate that with your professors or with any groups that you're a part of, just taking the time that you need to get better, because if it gets to a point where it's very bad, then it can just completely take you out, which is never something that you want.
I had mono at the end of my sophomore year, which is a terrible thing to get when you're in college, but there's a decent chance that you'll get it at some point. But my professors were just so supportive, and as soon as I said that I have mono, the dean of the college wrote me a note and said, basically, wrote a note to all of my professors and said, anything that Dustin needs, give it to him. If he asks for an extension, give it to him. If he needs to take an incomplete and finish his paper over the summer, give it to him. Because he has mono and he needs to be in bed for 8 hours a day, in addition to sleeping for 8 hours a night. So, yeah, even if you do get sick, there's great support, there's great help, and professors totally understand. There are a lot of different reasons why you would need an extension, especially in regard to the health, be it physical health, mental health, whatever.
Awesome. So that's great. I think we're gonna, for the last portion of this, we're gonna shift to talk a little bit more specifically about what it means to be a first-generation college student at Brown and some of the resources that exist for them. Obviously, I'm going to once again shift it to Dean Rome, I guess, to start us off. So what are some of the resources at Brown specifically for first-generation college students?
So everyone on this panel is first gen, so one, here's some resources. We have a first generation student group where we will have kind of just an opportunity for people to get together right in the space outside my office weekly, mostly to do studying, but kind of what Floripa was saying, sometimes your studying turns also into these big long conversations about life. And that's what we want. It's really difficult sometimes as a first generation college to think, okay, so they're talking about picking classes. I was always given my classes in high school. How do I pick that last class, that fourth class? It seems there's hundreds of courses. How can you pick out of those hundreds? It seems overwhelming. So one of the things that we really want students to realize is that other people have gone through the same thing, and it's better to lean on those resources. So also what Destin was saying about going to the dean of the college, we have hours for students to come in and talk about any difficulties they're having, and if we, sometimes you just need to talk it out, but sometimes we can point you in the direction of another resource that might be more suited to what's going on. How Jessica was saying that she didn't know there was a Brown pharmacy. Well, she had come in and said, gosh, I'm so sick, I can't go all the way down to the mall to go get this medicine. I would have said, hey, a block away is the pharmacy. So, that's what we're here for. And the first gen student group is about asking those questions that you sometimes feel like a little too silly to ask. One, of course, I'll say the platitude, there is no silly question, but we are hoping to really have students be mentored by sophomores, juniors, seniors, those incoming first years. We'll have a bunch of different activities. Actually, Stanley, I think that you should talk about it more. That we really want students to understand that there is a community here. We have a high percentage of first-generation college students in the class. It's over 200 incoming, so times that by 4 for the 4 years. And there's quite a significant group on campus. And there are also a lot of faculty and staff who are first generation themselves and really speak to and are committed to helping students, not just first gen students, all students, but really helping them navigate that new experience.
Fantastic. Thanks so much. I'm going to pose a question to the panelists now. Is there any specific advice that you all would give to some of the parents out there who are sending their kids off to college for the first time, on advice that you might give them on how they can help support their students from afar? And also, Dean Rome, if you have any advice as well, feel free to chime in.
So one thing that I'll say from my experience, which was a little difficult, was just to really stay connected. It was hard, especially being in this new place, navigating all these new things, to really plan time and schedule that time for a call back home. So I would just say be very intentional and schedule that time out and talk to your student about anything. I know one thing, before I went to college, I became Facebook friends with my mom. Not saying that that's what everybody has to do, but it was a really easy way for her to see my pictures and see who I was talking about, and see the dorms, or see all my books and things like that, and keep up to date about what I was doing. So yeah, as communication's really huge.
Awesome. Yeah, I can definitely attest to that point. Oh, Destin, looks like you're about to...
No, go ahead, Stanley. If you have something to add, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say that in my experience, I had a very similar experience. Of course, my mom was also like, "Oh dear God, like I'm sending my child into the unknown," because I took the flight to Brown by myself.
Hmm.
It was one of the first times I'd been on an airplane, and she was really worried because in her mind, she was like sending me off to this black hole. She had no idea what Brown was like, who my roommate was, and we said it over the phone. But I think one of the great things about, I guess, growing up in this time now for students is, we have access to things like phones where we can like take pictures and send them back to help physically show our parents like what our dorm looks like. And so once I know for me, like really early on in the year, I had a Skype session with my mom, and being able to walk her around my dorm and show her my room and let her see my roommate was a big thing that helped, I think, just like calm her nerves a lot around some of the anxiety she had about sending me to college. Destin, if you got anything to add.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, communication is of course like really important. I feel like freshman year I didn't talk to my mom as much as I like needed to or wanted to even because I just felt busy and sort of like stressed out all the time, and I didn't want all of our conversations to be me being stressed out. So that was like, one thing that was like hard to overcome at times. But yeah, I'm also connected to my mom on Facebook, and like, she knows pretty much like who my best friends are. Like I'm taking pictures of them all the time, and she did get to come visit campus eventually, and so when she got there, like she already sort of knew a little bit about like how my life was there. So that was really great. But one thing I was gonna say, like gestures. So if any parents are listening, like even like little gestures, like care packages and things. Like it sounds small, but it like took my mom a long time to send me a care package, even though I kept dropping hints. Um, but when I finally got one, and I know she knows all of my favorite things, so she sent me like some Red Hots and like a bunch of sour candy and all these things that I would always eat at home. Um, it was just really great to get that, especially it was around Halloween, and like a lot of families send like care packages on Halloween, Valentine's Day, and Thanksgiving, things like that. So it was some gestures like that. And then I remember one time my mom got my entire family to sign a ginormous birthday card for me. Um, and it's still hanging in my room. Actually, well, it will be whenever I come back to campus. I use it as like decorations in my room, but it just reminds me of the family that I have back home. And seeing everyone's name written on the card all the time is just really nice. So little gestures like that definitely help me keep it.
Awesome. Thanks, Destin. Anything to add, Flo?
I think one thing I would add is that it's okay to kind of be learning about the process along with your student. Because for me, I come from like a small reservation south of Albuquerque, so the city in New Mexico, and so sometimes it's if my family doesn't exactly know or always like take the time to like look on a map or something to see where Brown is exactly in relation to like bigger cities like Boston or New York. And so sometimes when I have conversations where I talk about, but I went to Boston this weekend, just both for the students remembering to kind of contextualize where you're at for your parents, especially if they don't know, but also for parents to acknowledge that it's okay to be learning as you go along, because sometimes big things like choosing a degree or going through classes can be very confusing, but that's okay because at the end of the day, you're learning along with the student, and I think having that communication as you go along will really help with guiding your student and guiding yourself through the college process as well.
Mm, yeah, go for it.
So my mom says that I gave her a whole head of gray hair when I went off to college. She said I called her every day crying. I don't really remember that, but I do know I had a really hard time. And one of the things that I think was really hard for her is she wanted to solve all the feelings of disconnect that I was having and how hard my classes were compared to when I was in high school, and she couldn't do that. And I think that's the biggest difficulty for parents, and as a parent myself, I know what you want to do for your child is solve their problems or at least help them navigate that. So I think the biggest thing for parents to do who don't know about college is just to kind of ask, well, you know, what kinds of things have you done to maybe, if you're having a problem in class, have you talked to your professor about it? Have you talked to your teaching assistant, or have you signed up for tutoring? Do you know that there's tutoring? You know, I heard from Dean Rome that there is, and I was looking at it, you know, to try to look through all the papers that we send home and the emails that we send home. You know, one of the things that we hear is that students don't read the emails that we send to them. Well, that has all the pertinent information you need to know. And I know that it's difficult sometimes, especially if families whose first language is not English. But asking your child to say, all right, so I see that there's this thing here. Can you let me know what this is saying? Because I really want to know what's going on. And there really are a lot of opportunities for parents to find out what's going on without even necessarily stepping on campus. I know that it's very difficult because it is this, like you were saying, Stanley, your mom sent you off to this black hole. But one, we're not that scary. We're not really a black hole. There are lots of people. I do get a lot of calls from parents who are saying, well, I know that my child, because one of the titles that I have had is Director of Academic Support, so I know that my child is having problems in this class. You know, you're the Director of Academic Support. What can you do? And what I usually end up telling parents is, like, well, tell your child to go to the resources that exist. And that's sometimes the hardest thing for students to do, is to actually go and access the helps that we've put in place. But the reasons we've put them in place is because students need help. So we know that it's difficult, and we are here to help.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dean Rome. It looks like we're just about out of time. So I want to say final thank yous. Thank you so much to, first, all of our wonderful panelists for being here today. Awesome. It really is such a huge help to have all of you here answering questions for the incoming students and their families. I hope that this provides a really big help to students and families in helping to ease that transition. So I'd like to specifically thank Dean Rome in the Office of the Dean of the College for helping to put this hangout together, and also CIS and Stephanie Adoba, specifically in CIS, for helping us figure out the technology to help us make this possible. And it looks like we're just about out of time. So a note for viewers is that if you want to view this hangout later, or maybe show your parents if they weren't able to view it live, this link will be available on Brown's YouTube page, and it will be archived, so you should be able to access this link after and go back to it if you want to reference it. And as another note, we're going to have another session happening in Spanish later today, the details of which should be emailed to, if you're a first-generation college student coming into Brown, should be emailed to you with the details on that. And it also should be available on Brown's Google Plus page. So once again, I want to thank everyone for coming and participating and answering questions and laughing with us. And I think that's it. Thank you so much, everybody. Any last...
I guess I was wondering, Stanley, I'm probably not as technologically savvy as you all are, but was there a place where people could put in their own questions? I don't really know how to do that.
Yes.
Or did it not come in?
I don't think, it looks like, I don't know if we got any questions during this session,
okay.
But it looks like, I hope it doesn't do the weird thing where I'm no longer visible. Still working on technology. But yeah, it looks like I think this has been a really great talk, and hopefully a lot of students found this very helpful.
Good. Welcome in a couple weeks. We'll see you.
Bye.
Yeah. I'm so excited.
Bye.
All right. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks, Jen.